10 years ago, this was a white work truck. Today, it's a 750 wheel horsepower monster with an entire company based around it.
I've been giving you the worst of me. Now you wanna stay tonight. Pretty how you work hard for me. While forgetting how to talk. Nah, I don't like no humble beats. Just go and slice it up.
Picture the scene, you're 17, you're looking for your first truck, and out in the field there's a broken 6-liter. Dad looks over at his lawn ornament that's been sitting there for a couple of years and says, "Don't waste your time on anything new. I'll sell you the Ford and you can fix that." Of course I'm paraphrasing, I have no idea what Brent's dad said at the time. I just know it was an older work truck that needed some repairs before it could go on the road. And it was also from a time, long time ago, where used cars used to depreciate. The 6-liters especially fell on hard financial times because of how much power you could get out of a 6.4, how much reliability you could get out of a 6.7, and how mired the reputation was. It's weird talking about yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And then not making it sound like a robot?
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot around on the market, so I kind of saw this sitting in the corner of the field collecting dust, and I was like, that's going to be a great first project. So the first mod I naturally did to this truck was an EGR delete and an oil cooler, because the oil coolers have problems too where they're going to explode and turn your coolant jug into a milkshake.
But of course, once it was fixed, it had a new problem. It was slow. Of course, like anyone, when they buy their first diesel truck, you find yourself a tune and you make it go as fast as it can on its stock components. I did that with my LBZ with a 5-position tuner, and on my 12 valve I went like this with the fuel plate. It's just what you do with the diesel truck. And it makes for a fun truck. I mean, 6-liters are characterful engines. They make wicked noises, and you just have a lot of fun with them.
And then, of course, once you start turning up the power and you start playing with a bit, naturally, it's going to blow the head gasket like every other 6.0 does.
Of course, tuning any truck, you're going to have problems as you try to build more power. You might blow a head gasket on a 6-liter, but you'll blow a transmission in a Cummins. On a Duramax, you'll need a lift pump, and my Allison exploded when I put a tune on it. Any truck will have its shortcomings as you try to push the power limits higher and higher. Weirdly enough, it wasn't the engine that gave them the final problems.
Pairing a stage 2 from KC turbos along with a good set of studs, I was able to push about 450 horsepower to the wheels, and that's kind of about where the stock injectors limit these trucks. I kind of drove around with that setup for about 6 months to a year, and then I decided to step it up. I ordered some 205-100 injectors from Warren Diesel Injection, and I paired that with a non-VGT S366. I kind of wasn't really happy with different tuning support there was. Each tuner had their own pros and cons. One might shift better, one might fuel better down below, or one might have better top-end power. But there's really nothing that I found that grouped them all together.
And it was at this point the decision was either to keep going for bigger numbers or leave the truck as is. And luckily, he doubled down for more.
So like every other person that wants to learn something, you hop on Google and you start trying to search around what the heck I can plug into this thing to try and turn up the power or figure out how to do it myself. And to my success, I managed to find exactly that. I managed to find a program that would work directly with the tuning device I already had and supply me with enough information on actually what the heck I'm going to be doing.
Trial after trial, and each new revision ended up making a really solid tune. I've driven many 6-liters. I own one myself. This is one of the best driving ones I've been in.
Kind of hear it's happy, and you see it there, and you get on the brakes, and you want your boost, so you got lots of boost, so you're good to go.
This wasn't some store-bought truck. This was trial and error, trying to figure out things for the first time. And that tuner on the passenger seat every morning as he drove into work, figuring out what works and what doesn't. And sometimes it doesn't.
It's like every new thing you start, it's never gonna go to plan. The first tune I ever loaded on this, it didn't even start. It didn't even run. I didn't know what was going on. But I sat there in the Walmart parking lot trying to figure out why the tune I just loaded on my truck never started.
And it was along that journey that he learned a thing or two about a thing or two. And if you solve all the problems that 6-liter tunes have, well, all of a sudden you have a tune that other 6-liter owners might want.
Driving my truck every day, I managed to be able to dial in the tuning on this thing myself because you can feel what you're doing on the road, you can know how it drives, you know how it shifts, you know how it builds boost, you know how it accelerates. Owning a 6.0, you tend to have a lot of friends that also own 6 liters and suffer from the same problems. So what started out about me helping out my friends, maybe tuning their truck, getting it to drive better, sporadically turned into me owning a tuning company.
No, I don't like no hobbies. Just go and suss it up. No, it's not too bad. Right after we're done, it's done.
And this is really perfect because 6-liter popularity has skyrocketed. We've since learned that even though the 6.4 is a powerhouse, it's really good at turning metal pieces into a fondue, which makes them a little short on their lifespan. Next to that, the 6.7 has such high resale values that picking up a 6-liter, fixing the known issues, and then giving it a bit more power is almost the buy-in price of just a stock 6.7. Couple that with the fact that the drivetrain in these trucks is pretty stout, you have a lot of room to grow under the hood where you don't have to worry about your transmission, which is good for about 500 to 600 horsepower so long as you're not a monkey. Peakside Performance was born of just happening to have figured it out and realizing that other people probably have the same concerns. It was an enthusiast answering the question an enthusiast had. There is something brilliant about the sound of a big turbo in a diesel. A big turbo in anything really just makes some great noises. One thing about diesels that's kind of interesting to drive them fast, especially when they make big power, is they don't quite rev out as much as you would expect in a gas car. So when you're turning 6,000 or 7,000 RPM in a gas car, you're turning 3,000 or 4,000 RPM in a diesel. And so there's so much more torque making you move faster. It's just a different experience because audibly you expect to hear 2 or 3 pulls, but when you hear 2 gears in a diesel, you've changed your speed exponentially. It's just interesting. On a highway pull, it's not quite so explosive, but you'll look down and realize you've gained a lot of speed.
The stock rotating assembly on these trucks are good for about 800 to 1,000 horsepower, so I decided to step up my power right on the line of where it might be safe, depending on how I drive it. So that's when I decided I was going to call up Warren Diesel Injection and get some 205 100s for the truck and pair that with a 300 frame S366 turbo. In 6.0s, they have 2 levels of studs. You have your 425 ARPs and you have your 625 ARPs. And there's kind of a limit right down the center of if your head gasket is going to blow again and that you should have did the bigger studs to begin with. On top of that, we stacked a ported intake, an intercooler, and a full piping kit on this truck. We're rocking a fully built valve train, a fully built transmission, and a new rear end.
One of my favorite things about this truck is even though it makes 750 horsepower and it's kickstarted a business, it's still his truck. He doesn't own anything else right now, so when it's cold, when it's minus 15 and it's snowing, this is what he's going to be taking to work, so it needs to start and it needs to be reliable, and he has to trust his tuning and his build to actually get him to work. That's pretty cool. Having your truck start a business because you had a problem you couldn't find answers to makes this one of the coolest trucks I've driven on this channel.